Welcome to the show. I'm Ryan Gomez.
And I'm on the internet. Hi there.
Oh, it's going to be one of those episodes.
It's going to be one of those.
We're looking at the top 5 decks we believe are going to make a strong appearance at the Kaladesh Pro Tour.
So we've already looked at 2 aggressive decks. We looked at a pretty dirty deck yesterday, right? But today we're going to be looking at a classic archetype. It's mid-range, but it's got a little bit of a twist. We're going with black-green Delirium this time.
Yeah, so I like this one. It scores pretty well-rounded across the chart overall here.
Yeah,
you can see.
Jack of all trades, master of nothing. That's kind of how mid-range decks roll. It's very clean. It's not like yesterday's deck where they were doing undercost and stuff.
Yeah.
This thing's not cheating on any of its mana. It's playing all its cards with just up and down the curve.
By the book. Yep, it's a little bit more towards the controlling side of things. It's got a fair amount of removal in the deck itself and options for playing more in the sideboard if it decides to tap into those. So, what's going on with these various card types? We said it's a Delirium deck, but I don't see a lot of enchantments. I don't see any way to really put lands in your graveyard. What's going on here?
So the hope is that Grapple with the Past, one of the more overpowered cards in Standard, kind of pulls a lot of weight. We've got the Gear Hulks. We've got Verdurous Gear Hulk. We've got Noxious Gear Hulk. Those are artifacts in addition to creatures, so if you dump one of those in the graveyard early, it's kind of a 2-for-1 there.
Yep.
But yeah, you're really leaning on Grapple with the Past, which, I mean, you've got Liliana, and that card, you can just kind of suicide it quickly to get it in the yard and get more stuff going. But yeah, it's by the book in all ways. Most of these Delirium decks, most of the time they play like Evolving Wilds or Vessel of Nascency. Vessel of Nascency is like Delirium in a can, but that it's not in this deck, which I found really odd.
Okay, so without such an overt Delirium plan, how does this deck really win games then? How does it achieve its plan?
Okay, so pretty straightforward. It's got Smuggler's Copter in order to dump more cards in the yard because you can't play Standard without Smuggler's Copter. And what else you've got? You've got Grasp of Darkness, kill their Smuggler's Copters. Pretty smart, clever answer to Smuggler's Copter problem.
One of the better ones, yeah.
Yeah, so what you're going to do is you're just going to go up the curve and hope that all your spells are just bigger than theirs. What you've got is you've got Grimflayer, you've got, I think it's called Darkwood Dryad. It's the one that gets Death Touch. It has Death Touch and it gets +2/+2 when you have Delirium. Yes. So you're deploying creatures at not a great rate, like it's a Grizzly Bear or it's a 1/1-for-1, but they get bigger as you fill your graveyard, so they kind of scale with the game. And what happens is you keep deploying these creatures, you keep flooding the board, and eventually you are able to overpower your opponent because your creatures just get better.
Okay, both of those creatures excellent targets for the +1/+1 counters coming off the green Gear Hulk there as well. Have trample on the Grimflayer. All right, so seems like a pretty solid game plan. How do I beat this deck then?
Oh, okay, so I'm going to go over some of the problems with the kind of mid-range archetype. So what happens when you're mid-range is that, like I said before, you don't do everything very well. So when you play against a control deck, you have to get aggressive when you're mid-range. And the problem with that is your cards aren't built very aggressively. So sometimes you're not going to be able to beat a control deck before they kind of get the lock going. Same with aggressive decks. You're not all the way control. So you're not going to be able to kind of take control of the game and establish your lock before these little aggressive decks just swarm you to death. Alternatively, against like the combo decks, against the dirty decks, what happens is you've got to race them. So you need to be aggressive and you need to race them. So what ends up happening is you're not aggressive enough to race them and they just get you. This deck doesn't have much in the way of hand disruption in it. So kind of using a linear deck that kind of goes over the top of this one, be it kind of the Aetherworks Marvel deck or maybe some sort of aggressive deck. It really depends on this deck's draw, but I don't like mid-range as an archetype much, but it's worth highlighting. There are some good cards in here. Ishkanok Graph Widow, excellent card. There are good cards in this deck. The archetype leaves me wanting a little bit. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Would it be safe to say that this deck has no really great matchups, but also no really bad ones?
That's exactly it. It's a bunch of coin flips, and you get to interact with your opponent a lot, and playing Magic like that is fun.
Sure. All right. So how would you make this deck better?
I would add Vessel of Nascency.
Vessel.
I would add Vessel of Nascency. I would add Evolving Wilds. I would try to get that Delirium going a little bit faster.
Of course.
Probably try to power out some Emrakul, the Promised End. Maybe set myself up for some good Emrakul turns,
Sure.
you know? Yeah, I think that's it. Like, Vessel of Nascency, I really found that odd that this deck was missing that. I mean, you've got Traverse the Uvenwald, which is awesome once you get there, but getting there seems to be a whole thing. I would want to go up to 4 copies of, oh man, what's it called? The instant, the 1 green instant that I just mentioned before already. Grapple with the Past.
Yes.
Grapple with the Past. I want to go up to 4 copies of that, because that card's really strong, especially in a deck like this that's just made up of creatures. Also, there are some cool one-ups I might want to try, because you've got that Traverse the Uvenwald package, so...
more of a toolbox kind of approach.
Yeah,
to
exactly. Maybe Demon of Dark Depths, or...
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So, stuff like that, you know, it could be a toolbox deck. It's really flexible. That's kind of the nice thing about mid-range decks. You can customize them however you want.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, that's the way I'd go with it. Just try to figure out the decks you want to beat, and then figure out how to beat them and apply it to the list.
Absolutely, not bad advice at all. So this is another fun one you can pick up for FNM. We can certainly watch and see how this performs. I expect to see it doing very well at Pro Tour Kaladesh coming up this weekend. Ooh, speaking of which, you can read all about, we've got some great authors putting in their work here this week, all about Pro Tour, gearing up for that. What can they find at Magic.TCGplayer.com?
Well, at Magic.TCGplayer.com, you can find articles by the pros, as Ryan said, talking about Kaladesh every day, leading up to the big day. We've got Craig Wesco coming up on Friday. He always writes about his Pro Tour deck, so I'm looking forward to that, because he works with a lot of good pros. He's a really awesome player himself. He always comes up with something sweet.
Yes.
We've got a buy list. You can sell your cards to us. We've got cards for sale. So if you see something in this list or any of the other lists we previewed this week that you want to just sink your teeth into and rock at an FNM or something,
especially before Pro Tour, because prices tend to shoot up when everyone realizes what the hot cards are. So if there's something you're on the fence right now, probably better to get it before that rush.
Excellent point.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So lots of great stuff to find at Magic.TCGplayer. We'll be back later this week with another couple of decks to look at that we think are going to do well in the Pro Tour. But that is it for today. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye, Internet.